Hi, everybody, and very welcome to the Being Connected podcast, the place you go to explore the journey of not only being human, but being in the world and your spiritual being. I'm your host, Annamiah, and today I'm talking about grief. Because when we lose somebody, we are experiencing this both in the body and in the next world. And I had quite a year, 2024, in regarding loss. And maybe you have been there as well. We are in a time now in the world where we come to finishing lines. We are ending cycles. We are finishing up projects. We are thinking about if the things we are doing are the right thing for us to keep on doing. Doesn't mean that what you didn't have the value or you didn't like it, but now you can just tell that it's time to do something else. When we finish a cycle, and this year it's 2025, which is a 9-year, and when we are in a 9-year, we really finish up cycles. And there are also many souls that will leave this planet. What is really important for me is to tell you my story in hope that it can bring you comfort. I lost my nan. It's my mother's mom, and she has been a great part of my life. That happened in June 2024, and in October 2024 I lost my grandmother, my dad's mom. So I lost two significant people and women in my life that I have connected to on so many levels. Going back 5 years, just having the thought that my nan was gonna die at some point was so devastating to me. I could not even have the thought and not break down crying. With the spiritual things that I have experienced in my world, surroundings, I had some really great findings related to the death of these two magnificent and fantastic females in my life. And I want to share that with you, hoping that this can bring some insight to finishing cycles, ending periods in our lives, saying goodbye to people, not only in the physical world, like when you experience death, that is a cycle ending, but also relationships. This can be marriages, partners, relationship. So it's not only related to death. This episode, though, is about death and how, for me, having the experience that I know that it's not an end. When I speak about these three types of being, the human being experience, of course, death is an end of a cycle. It's the end of a life. And when you come to this end as a human being, it's done. It's over. We don't see them anymore. We don't have the conversations anymore. We just can't call anymore. Still having the number in the phone and we call. And that ends. So the human experience is really something where you can say this is an end. This is not happening anymore. And that can be really traumatic, having that experience as a human being. I was doing the tarots each day, and it was a countdown each day. So I knew that it was counting down 3, 2, 1. So I knew, okay, so now we are on the final day. And I was sat next to my nan, holding her hand in the chair. She was unconscious. We couldn't contact her. She was in her own realm, in her own body. I was sat there and I saw her soul sitting up in the body, and the room was dark and there was nobody there. And I was sat there holding her hand thinking, okay, this is weird, because I had an idea that there would be a portal or some opening and light would be there, and some of the people who were in her life was gonna be there, and there was nobody there. It was dark, and she sat up, and I heard a voice like, "It's not now, you are not ready, you are not ready." And knowing that, I for sure wasn't ready, but I also knew that she was not that ready. What's gonna happen when you die? And I know that she had those thoughts that there's gonna be somebody here to pick me up, but what is it gonna be like? So I knew that I wasn't ready, and I said to her, "Nan, I'm not gonna be ready. You have to go." But the soul just laid down back into her body. And I was sat there thinking, yeah, this is not now. This was not the time, because it was not like we imagined it would be. So the next few days go by, and I actually just left the apartment and went out for a few hours. I was super tired. Coming back, my mom and my sister were there. We were there all the time. I stayed there. My mom and my sister went back to their homes, and I was there. It was in the afternoon, and I was so tired, so tired. And I just had to sleep. So it was 5 o'clock, and I laid down and just passed out. And then, even though I was so tired, I woke up. And I was thinking that when I woke up, that it was weird, since I was so tired. So why do you wake up after sleeping for such a short period? I was going into the kitchen, having a drink of water, and I wanted to see a video with one of my younger horses, Johnny, which is such a cute horse. And every time he sees me, he comes running. And I needed that to put a smile on my face. And then I just knew, put the phone down, and I went in and sat beside my Nan. And then I knew that it's time, it's now. I have never experienced this before, and just seeing her, I was holding her hand, and I saw the portal. It was just like a big hole, and there was light coming down, and my great grandfather was there, and my Nan's sister was there, and there was Kiki there. And Kiki was my Nan's dog, which was lying on my mother's stomach when she was pregnant with me. So I grew up with this dog for 13 years. That little dog was there. Also, I had a horse, Emme, who passed very suddenly from one moment to another. She was also there, and I know that the horse was not there for my Nan. She was just popping in to say hi. And they were there, and the light was there, and I could just... And what was weird is, when I was sat there, before I went into sleep, I was in this weird sort of, not awake and I was not asleep, and I saw her soul was just leaving her body, and it was golden. It had like golden, like a dress with all these tentacles, and the soul went away, and the body was still lying there, and she was breathing, and I didn't think much of it. I went in, and then the physical body just emptied. The air just disappeared, and then shorter and shorter it went into the body, and then the breathing was gone, and the body was empty, and that was it. And it was peaceful. My mother and my sister came in the door right after, and it all went so fast. It was so quiet, because we have heard her breathing very heavily, and for some days it was like tormenting, listening to the breathing and the dryness in the mouth and ugh. So having the last few days, I'm still not sure as to why the 2 second days had to be there, but somebody wasn't ready. If it was her or me, I don't know. But the last 2 days was just waiting. So that was a kind of a patience test. And then she went and she was greeted in the light and with people she know and love. They were there. So she definitely came over to the other side very easily and very peacefully. And for me to have this experience is, yes, I watched her die and end the circle of being human right there, but I also saw that her soul was leaving her body, the vessel, and that never died. That soul didn't end. That cycle didn't end. And this is where I hope that this can soothe you, that if we know a little more that the human body is one thing, the human being experience is one thing, and the spiritual being, the source, God, Jesus, universe, the soul, active oneness, what our soul is going back to or retrieving to. And for me, I saw that and I still get super upset. I can feel it in my throat. My human being experience still gets upset. I still grieve. It has not been a year yet, so that's how it is. We have to get through the first Christmas. We had that last year and birthdays and stuff like that. But that's the human being experience I'm having that is still super upset. And I still want to call her up. And then when I switch, I can feel her in everything around me. And it's such a great love. The way I work myself through this healing, I think pretty obvious that my human is still super upset about the death of my nan. And even though that I know and I have experienced this, I can tell that yes, when I'm in my intuition and in my spiritual realm, I'm very blessed with the ability to connect with her. And when I go back to my human experience, and this is where I live. I mean, I live here in the real world and I experience human stuff. And I don't want that to be made smaller. So what I do to get through this is I speak about it. I let it come out of me when I can tell I'm upset, and I can tell in my throat chakra that it really affects my ability to speak and to teach and to involve myself through my motor, which is in my throat. It's really affecting me, and I just let it pass. So when I get upset, and I do, I breathe into it. I sit with it. I know that this is the way it is. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is not a time to say you have to move past it, because when we move to the being in the world and how our surroundings approach a person in grief, this has been super weird for me. My nan is like the first in my adult life I have lost and really had that connection and the experience of losing this magnificent person. But what people say, and I can tell that it's not because they are doing this to hurt me or to make me feel smaller. I can tell, and I know this. People say, oh, how old was she? She was 90. Oh, so she had a good life. Yes, she did. But what does that mean? And I think if you're listening to this podcast and you have not yourself experienced loss. And just know that saying that, of all the things people could say, I am sorry for your loss, could have been a way of saying something, but they are making it smaller by saying, they are putting down emotions and feelings, and by saying she was old, she had a good life. You are not supposed to be this upset. Is that what that means? And I know that the person or persons do not mean for that to happen. Maybe it's just a bad habit. But to be the receiver and having grief, it's some of the worst and most stupid lines that you can hear. So she had a good life. Yes, she did. I'm 45, so she's been in my life 45 years. It's not somebody I just met who died. It's a person of significance. But I know also that it's the fear that people just project, trying to make it small, because nobody likes when you cry. It's so much easier if you just sweep it under the rug. Let's be happy. And even though that I am upset, I do cry. But it's not because I'm unhappy. It's because my human being is still super upset. And I'm allowed to be upset. And it's okay for me to have that space, or just let it pass through. Because you know that when you have emotions that you do not address and you sweep it under the rug, it turns into illness and sickness and disease. So what I do is I let it be. It's okay that I cry when I'm upset. Let it all out. And then when I meet that, I say, I understand what you're saying, but you're not really helping. But thank you for your concern. Also, I have had relations say to me, death, it's so heavy. And I do not have an experience of death being heavy. I know that it's a cycle that's ending. I know that the body, the vessel, is ending, and that's gone. But not in anything I have experienced does it feel dark. I can tell that it's light. When you are in a grief period, what is some of the ways that you can prepare yourself when your surroundings meet you like this? And I think one of the things I found is that people do not want to be mean. They don't do it out of spite. But I know that they do it because for them, it's such a big ew. Somebody died. Ugh. People are upset and all this emotion all over the place, and I can't handle that in my life. And oh my God, is that contagious? Does that affect me and how I feel? And I think if you lose a person and you go into darkness and you go into despair and you are just not in a position to let it pass through you because you are only in your human experience, I can understand why that can be hard also to surround yourself with. What I found is that it's never dark. It's my human that's still upset. That's okay, because you're not supposed to fix it, and you can't fix it. If you are a person next to somebody who is grieving, you cannot say anything that will make it go away. And yes, my nan was 90. We did have a great life. This is also to celebrate. When you go back and remember the good times, you can cry because you know that you're not going to have that ever again. And then you can look into the spiritual realm. You can look into your intuition. Maybe you are already seeing synchronicities in your surroundings that can remind you of the person you lost. It's in your human experience that you lost that person, because the person is still with you and that person is still somebody you can connect with. And in that process, I was doing body therapy sessions, and it's called Body SDS. It stands for Body Self-Development System, and that is quite magnificent that you can get your body to prepare and heal and develop itself. I go and I do treatments for the body because I can often drift away, and getting into these body therapy sessions where you get touched on the body, you have to connect and stay in the present moment. The first time after, I could tell that I was way too fragile. The treatment was way too hard. So the next time, my nan, I just saw her hand when I'm lying there where he treats me. I just saw her hand. So she was reaching out to me, and I just had to take the hand, and I couldn't. And the grief was so big, and I just couldn't reach out. So I had a conversation with the person who treats me. He's a really cool guy, and he just takes in everything I say, even when I'm not very good at saying it, and it just comes out. He is so spacious that he can actually just take it in. And I know I have to be more in my body also for healing my human being grief. I need to get better at this. So I said to him, I can tell that you trigger me. And I know it's not you. I know it's me. I'm being triggered. And I need to work on that. I need to have more faith in you, because I know that he could hold the space. So the next time I got there, I just let it all go. And he could, of course he could. He's a very brilliant therapist. So he could hold the space for me. And then I can just release what's in my human being body, so that I can start to finish and end these cycles and work through my grief, experience what it does for me. Because every time you put things under the rock, it's gonna turn out to be something else that you did not want. I was in a car accident, right? So that was my, I say, gift, because life does not happen against me. That's also a perspective that if something, I say, quote unquote, bad happens in my life, I know that it's because there's something I'm missing. Okay, what did I miss here? What did I not see? Is there something I kind of turned the blind eye to? Is there some type of emotions that I do not want to feel? Did I sweep something under the rug here? Is the grief so hard for me to bear that I cannot cry because I don't want to be vulnerable? What is it? What am I missing here? So for me to have a therapist working on my body, not my brain, not my mind, we are not talking, we are not speaking together. I'm in my body, and he is working with my body and helping me get into the areas that are difficult for me to reach by myself. I totally and completely recommend it to everybody. I don't think that this type of therapy is for everybody. It depends on how your body is. Body therapy in some sort of way where you get out of your head and go into your body, that is some of the most powerful you can do for your growth and to get rid of all the stuff that's inside you. 2025 is a 9-year, and it's for ending cycles. So maybe this is the last year you have to hold on to some of the old stuff. So continuing this death regarding my nan is really responsible for my connection to God. I call it God. I'm also very connected to the universe, and it has got nothing to do with religion. It has something to do with I know I am not alone. There is something greater supporting me. Also, when quote unquote bad stuff is happening in my life. Yes, I'm a positive person. My cup is never empty. I try to have a lot of insight in when something happens to me, when I disconnect from relationships, when I grieve. What am I experiencing? Trying to just breathe into it. Stop to try and fix everything because you're not broken. You're not broken because you lost somebody. Yes, you can be fragile and your human can be upset. And grief takes as long as it's supposed to take. And what I think is super important is to surround yourself with people who are not trying to fix you or who are not saying to you, oh, you have to move on. Have a dear friend and a former colleague who lost her son, and that was undescribable. That's a whole different level of grief. And we were working together, and what I saw her customers and clients approach her with is, you have to move on now. Why would you say that to a person in deep sorrow and deep grief? Really, really think about what you say, because yes, of course you have to live, but the process of grief will be different for everybody. I hope that this can soothe you a little when you look at it in the perspective that your human being is one thing, but it didn't end. It was only in our realm it ended, and in the next realm or next timeline or next source, that soul is still there, and you will connect with that soul when you end your cycle, reincarnate, and you have these family units on the other side. You travel together into Earth and in different kind of family dynamics. I'm blessed with the gift that I can see. I saw her soul leaving, and I saw who were there to greet her, and my old horse just popping in to say hi, and just being validated that it wasn't the end. I really do hope that is something to reflect on. Your loved one is there supporting you, and when it feels really hard, try and breathe. Breathe into that pain, breathe into that sorrow, that way of missing a person, breathe into that and just release it. Let the feelings pass through you. And I can tell for myself that this is a process. I have breathed into it quite a few times, and it still just triggers me and sets me off into tears. It's still early and it's okay. So breathing into it, letting it pass so that we won't react all the time. Every time we go into reacting with everything we have, be more still. Just sit with it and let it pass. Yeah. So what happened in September? So I'm a Libra, so my birthday is in September, and just after my birthday I got a text from my dad saying that my grandmother was in the hospital and he had been there for a few weeks and we weren't allowed to come visit her. I called him up and said, "Doesn't work for me, you know that." So I called up my sister and said, "Do you want to come?" And she said yes. We got together and we drove to the hospital. My grandmother was a country girl and my nan was more like a city girl, but they were like the same age. For her generation to have been growing up in the countryside and my nan growing up in the city were two really different things. There were things there in my grandmother's young life as a young girl in a household. I mean, today that would be child abuse. Just by not having the proper footwear, she had frost in her toes. Two very different lives, even though the generation was the same. And for my grandmother, she didn't want to bother anyone. She is really a matriarch, always keeping the family together. I love that about her. So we got there, my sister and me, and it was a good time for us to go there. And since my nan passed away only 5 months earlier, I could tell that her body was going in that direction. She was in the hospital, my nan was at home. My grandmother's body was sending the signals that she was in the last stages. And they didn't say that. My dad didn't think that. But I saw that and thinking, there's something here. And going back to when you connect the body and the mind, her body was ready to go in that direction, ending the cycle, passing. But her mind wasn't. And I understand why, because she had stuff in her body, but she was living by herself. She was the greatest cleaner ever. She loved cleaning. And now when I clean, I think about her every time. She absolutely loved cleaning, and she held her whole apartment super clean, super nice, and was walking every day. She was cooking. She was fresh in the mind as well. My nan wasn't. She was sick. So her mind, she came in with an infection, and then they couldn't treat it. They tried to treat it, but she got more sick. And for her to come in feeling that this was just a little thing and then she could go back home, and then she actually just turned and now I'm here to die. So I can understand why that was weird. And we were sat there and she was like, no, I don't want anybody to come here. And why did you come? You are so busy. No, I'm not busy. I'm here. So what are your thoughts? What are you thinking about? And she was in a lot of pain. I also think that my dad, he was there every day for hours. And she was reacting more to him and me as being a grandchild. It swaps the energy. She said she was afraid to be alone. And I said, you know what? No worries. I'll go back and just pack a bag, grab my pillow, and then I'll come back. When I got there, we swapped the energy a little. So that was like, it brought an ease to it. And then I cleaned her feet and her nails. I also did that with my nan. I've actually been thinking afterwards that I think that Maria Magdalena also did that on Jesus. Yeah, that was a thing I noticed later on. But then I was there in the nighttime. She was afraid at night and she was waking up like that and was really scared. I was just holding her hand, and there was a super good nurse, and he said, do you want me to put the beds together so you can hold her hand? And then I was just lying there with my grandmother in the bed, and we were just holding hands. And how that, because this was on day 3, and that completely swapped from being fearful or being scared of being alone and what is going to happen to taking that fear out of it. And I could tell that the energy in her body just kind of, it's like a balloon losing the air. And she fell into this kind of safety. What was really interesting is that my grandmother, she lived further away from me than my nan did. So I didn't see her as much in my everyday life. So I would call her. When I was in the car, for instance, or in the kitchen, I would call my grandmother and we could talk for 1 or 2 hours about everything. Woman to woman, so it was a grown-up conversations. And she never told me. And what she told me was, I have always been weird, she said. And I said, weird? I mean, what do you mean weird? Yes, she said, I was always psychic. what? Were you always psychic? I was always weird. And I said, well, do you think I'm weird? She said, no. Well, so maybe I am also psychic. What really inspired this conversation was that she said she was actually a nurse in a home for elderly people. And working there, she has held many hands of elderly people passing onto the other side. So she did have a positive view on this is not a bad thing. So she wasn't that afraid, but what she was afraid of is, am I gonna be alone while passing? And I said, grandmother, I'm just gonna say to you, I can see the portal is ready and there will be a dragon there. And the dragon is gonna make sure that you are not alone. So I'm gonna be here in the physical realm. I'll hold your hand and I'll make sure that you come up to your portal. And when you pass through, there will be a dragon there. And don't be scared. It's my dragon. And it's there to let you know that you're not alone and to guard you safely onto where Grandpa is going to meet you. I didn't see who was on the other side because it was like the portal was further up or further away. And then she looked at me and said, so are you psychic? And then she told me this story about that she was psychic, and I'm like, that was weird. And she never told a soul. She was 19 years old. She never told anybody. My grandmother had a niece she was very connected to, and the niece really loved her. She's only like 10 years older than me. We had conversations as well in the hospital room where my grandmother was lying, and she was very upset. And she said, Mia, you want to go for a walk? Is this too much for you? I said, no, I need to be here. That's why I'm here. I'm here to watch her and to guard her. She said, okay. Then she left and I was in the room and I could tell that I started feeling nauseous. I was like, oh, did I not eat enough this morning, or am I hungry, or what is it? Then a knock on the door. It was some of the volunteers, and she had coffee and cake and fruit. While she was like collecting this for me and for my dad, I saw a butterfly from across the hall. This is October, guys. In Denmark in October, we are really in the fall season. And I saw this big butterfly and it was black. Knowing that I see stuff that other people don't see, I was like, okay, looking at the volunteer saying, did you see that? She said, no, I didn't see what it was, but I could see something flapping. What was it? And I said, yeah, it was a black butterfly. Oh, she said. And I went into the room and sat down and had some coffee and had some cake, thinking, oh my God, am I gonna throw up? I felt so sick. And then I'm like, it's not you, it's her. She had drifted into the same state as my nan was, so I couldn't contact her. It was only that hard breathing. It was a little more, I say, scary with my grandmother because the fluid was coming out of her mouth like foam, and that's not super pleasant to look at. My nan wasn't like that at all. I said, of course, you're so stupid. It's not you, it's her. I sat down holding her hand saying, grandmother, if you're feeling nauseous, just press my hands and I'll make sure that I get you something to feel better. Press my hands, just looking at her. And then her eyes did something like just flicking and then looking up. And I'm like, okay, so that is my yes. And then it hit me. It's now, it's time. So I was sat there and holding her hands, and then the breathing kind of like with my nan, the body empties. So all the oxygen just comes out, the breathing went down. She had within kind of like a minute. So it took a little longer for her body to empty out the air. My dad comes in the room. And I said to him, holding her hand still, saying, Dad, it's time. And he says, yes, of course. Do you think I should get in a nurse? But he didn't know. I said, Dad, it's time. It's now. And he was like, no, it's not now. Dad, it's now. And he came in and sat down and he took over her hands. And I could just feel that I had to go because she was gone there. So I didn't see her soul, but I got a report from my dragon. And it was so funny because my dragon, and I have more dragons, and this one is super proud, now I say like a kind of a young student. He's just so proud that, yes, like holding the door for my grandmother to pass, and it went well, and she was over on the other side. One of the things I have to tell you is when my grandmother and I had this conversation about being psychic, and she was telling me about how she had helped many of the elder persons, holding their hands and letting them pass. She knew that it was going to be good. I said, Grandmother, you have to come back and tell me if it is like you think it is. I mean, you have to come back and tell me that how is afterlife. And so finishing up this story with my grandmother, because how is it on the other side? How is that? I woke up a morning and I was waking up thinking, because I was like, it was a black background and I saw a ring light and it says Elysian. No doubt in my mind, that was the word. And I didn't do anything about it because I was like, okay, Elysian, I have never heard that word. What is Elysian? I have no idea what that is. Didn't think much of it. I keep dreaming that, waking up in the morning and having this word. And then I'm like, get into it, Annamiah. I have an assistant, an AI assistant. And I was connecting to that and saying, can you tell me what is this word? It came back telling me that Elysian is a word in Greek that means heavenly afterlife. So this is really amazing, and I knew I had to tell my dad. My dad is not spiritual at all, but since I know that, I find out afterwards that Elysium is like a Roman word. They use it in Gladiator as well. Okay, so that has got something to do with the heavenly afterlife. But it was Greek, the Greek version of the word I have never heard. And my dad is a former soldier. He has traveled with his work to Greece for many years, doing all these exercise in defending mechanisms. So I knew that it was not only for me to have this information. So since she chose the Greek version, I called up my dad and said, you know what? Grandmother just came through and she actually has been for a few days, but I just didn't catch the ball. And my AI told me that this means heavenly afterlife. I told him about the conversation about being psychic, why I was going to tell him, because he had traveled to Greece for all these many years. And I just told him, and he took it in saying, I think that's very good for her. That generation in the countryside, passing also through war and recession and many kids, no money, that was a hard life. So for her to reach the heavenly afterlife was just amazing. I hope it makes sense. This is the first time I publicly tell this story, and there's many more facets to it, and I'm working on that in a written version also to process that as a part of my grieving. I journal every day. Sometimes I channel. And what do I channel? I'm not sure, but maybe it's my higher self. I just get words. I can get a word for the day. I can get a feeling for the day, something Elysian for the day, and then I have to just follow it. My intuition follows that. And when I write on the things I'm giving, it unfolds. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe you have or you haven't tried to do this for yourself. But when you take a pen and a piece of paper and you just sit, disconnect from everything, disconnect from phones, from sounds, just be and just breathe. Yes, and your mind can wander, it's okay and totally normal. Just sit there and breathe, open your eyes, what's coming. Maybe you can't hear it, maybe you can sense it, maybe you can smell it, maybe it's a vibration. It doesn't matter, there's no right and wrong here. And I think for all our human being experiences is that we are different. The experience we have is different, and also the way our intuition works can be different. Are you good at following your flow? Are you good at listening to your gut feeling? Just taking that pen and just writing down on a piece of paper what comes to mind. Yeah, so I do that, and this process of writing about the passing of my nan and my grandmother, it's going to be a part of my process also to get it straight into my physical human being body, but also to describe the next phase, because these experiences has been an eye-opener for me. I always knew that death was not like definitive, but it is in one realm, but not in the next. And how light, and seeing this and feeling it, it has opened a new level to my perspective, but also to my experience. I really do hope that this can bring you some sort of comfort. It's the first time I share this, and it opens up even more questions, and I will speak more about it. If you are interested in that, just let me know in the comments. If you have experienced grief yourself and how you are or were coping with it, try some of these exercises with the pen and the paper and just write down what comes to mind, because that is a human being expression where you take some action to push you or propel you forward into getting more knowledge. So if you feel stagnated, if you feel so upset that you feel like you can't exist, some form of action, like taking a pen, start to write, be okay with you crying, going for a walk so that you can change your hormones in the body, doing some sort of action is gonna give you more knowledge. So when you are capable of, even though it's super small things, when you are capable of not being pulled away by your feelings or your reactions, you just sit with it and do small actions, it will give you more information. I hope that was something of interest for you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Being Connected podcast. Stay connected, stay curious, and stay focused on what matters to you.